Hey guys, this is the second edition of this week's James's Weekly Tips, and today's video is going to cover macros. This is a question I've been asked by one of my clients in terms of how do you get, I'll put this a different way. What food should you eat to get the right amount of macronutrients? In simple terms, to the people that don't know what a macro is, a macro is uh, protein, carb, or fat, and that is a macronutrient. There's also a micronutrient, which if you'd like me to go into that in a later video, comment below, and I'll look to get that video out for you. To come back on my point on getting enough food to reach your macro numbers, a lot of people seem to be stressing about it uh, in terms of because a lot of fitness apps will focus more primarily on the calorie content, whereas with my clients, I want them to look more at their macronutrients and focus on that in the short term. Okay, the calories are important because obviously there's good and bad calories. Obviously, in terms of bad calories, if you're eating too much of a bad thing, obviously you're going to put weight on, but that's a different story. To come back onto the macros, obviously we'll say, for example, if I use myself as an example, I'll have 190 grams of protein a day. Okay, when I first started, that was quite difficult because I was only able to get about 100 grams from real whole foods, so I had to, with analyzing the data that I had through using MyFitnessPal, well, okay, where am I going to get the other 90 grams from? So obviously, it helps you from that standpoint to be able to see where you're at presently from getting it from, well, quote unquote, real food, and where will I have to supplement to be able to reach that number. Whereas to come on to the point where the clients are struggling, that they're probably at a similar level to where I was in terms of, okay, I'm only able to hit this number at present with being able to eat whole foods and such, and I will say to them, okay, well, this number that you're having shortfalls on, okay, in terms of protein, you'd have to supplement to be able to get that, because obviously, bearing in mind that 190 grams is based on my body weight. So if you're lighter than me, for example, what am I, about 70, around about almost 70 kilos with my prosthetic leg on, and the low 60s without it on. So obviously, the prosthetic leg I would subtract, because in all reality, there's no way whatsoever I could put muscle on that limb from training, because it's impossible. So obviously, I'd use that as my baseline, whereas for somebody else who's completely able-bodied or has an impairment, that they, to some degree, okay, wheelchair users exempt from that because obviously their legs don't work, so they're not able to train them. Whereas a disability that can use all four limbs will be able to some degree, with the disability in mind, be able to get some muscle definition. So obviously, they would be able to increase that muscle growth on that particular limb. So with them, okay, their baseline is a little bit bigger to a certain degree. So to come to kind of wrap that point up to a little bit, obviously your weight is going to be a factor in terms of calculating your macros as for when protein is concerned. So obviously it's going to fluctuate depending on your weight. So be it you're heavier than me, obviously you're going to have to look to increase that to a lot higher than which is the case with myself with 190. So it could be 200, 210, 220, and so on, based on your weight, and be it your goal is to lose weight or to put muscle on. Okay, that's going to be similar nature. We want to get you as much protein on board, so you're using that as an energy source, because obviously, as I've talked about in past videos, protein is that much harder for the body to break down, so it burns more calories to be able to use, well, it burns more calories to burn that, whereas opposed to if you looked at it from a carbohydrate standpoint, the carbohydrate is its natural source of energy. So for that one, it takes less energy to burn that. So if you looked at protein in comparison to carbohydrate, it's going to take less effort for the body to burn the food you've absorbed relative to if you had more protein. Okay, there are different circumstances where that's not the case. Obviously, government guidelines for protein is to have 70 grams. So, okay, you're gonna get 70 grams from meat. Now, where you're gonna get your other sources of protein? Okay, you've got fish, your plant-based protein. So, okay, fish, you've got countless different ones you could eat. Okay, the one that I'd probably say to possibly avoid, I won't say at all costs, but there are better examples of tin fish that you could get. So the one to probably avoid would be tuna. So if you want to have tuna, look to have it either fresh if you can, and it would be a better source of tuna, because from a canned source there's a higher concentration of mercury in it. And to kind of come back to that point of the macros, obviously when I've had clients say to me, I'm struggling to eat, what do I need to eat to be able to hit those numbers, it's when we say it's a form of flexible dieting, it is to a certain degree, whereas when we say it's a flexible diet, I'm passing not the buck over to you completely, but I'm leaving it in your hands to kind of decide what you're going to have at meal A, B, C, D on a particular day if you're training. So, as an example, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and after training. So I'm not constricting you like it would be the case of, say, for example, the Atkins diet, where you can only have meat, you can't have fruit, you can't have vegetables, and if there's a sort of vegetable that you can have, okay, it would be limited to just green veg in that diet. Whereas with a flexible diet, okay, there's going to be early doors, the first initial 2 to 3 weeks, we'd look to be eating similar to Atkins. Obviously, that is just to lose water weight initially and then just get you on track. But depending on the person, you would generally be able to last about say 10, 12, maybe 14 days before you start craving carbohydrates. Whereas if you look at it from any say quote unquote fad diet, you may be able to stick with it for the duration of, say, I don't know, for example, if the diet is 5 to 7 days, you'd be able to stick within those parameters for that period of time. You will lose weight, but once you start eating what you would normally do, you'll put the weight back on. So you're in that vicious circle of you never actually losing weight. Whereas the flexible one, like I said, it kind of gives you a little bit more control, and you're able to pick and choose to a certain degree what you can and can't have based on a shopping list that I would give you, in terms of, this is not a guideline as such of what you could have, but it's kind of examples of what you kind of, okay, I kind of discussed this with another client, in terms of, he said, is that all I could have? It's like, no, if I listed everything in the shop that you could have, instead of it being 1 page long, it could be about, if you actually read into it, into the extent, it could be 3 to 5 pages long. It's like, well, you don't really want to be doing that. It's just examples. Okay, There might be stuff on that list that you don't like. Okay, I'm not saying you have to eat it. That's just an example. It's like a generic template, so it's everybody's got a similar sort of template to work from, and you kind of go from there. Okay, if there's something else within those types of ingredients that you prefer, if as long as it's within those certain constraints, that's fine. So it kind of gives you more emphasis on being more accountable to yourself in terms of, oh, I can eat this, I can have that, and I kind of give more authority to you in terms of looking at it from a macro standpoint and working out your actual numbers. Say, for example, the best course of it would probably be to work out what you're going to either have the night before for the day ahead or the morning of, and then you can kind of predict, okay, if I have this for breakfast, this for lunch, this for dinner, this is what I'm actually at the moment. Say, for example, for protein, it was at, or we'll give a rough estimate of, say, 100 grams for that. Say you were on a training day, your carbohydrates, if we use mine as an example, was 130 grams. You were at 65 early doors, and then fats is about 80, I think it is, and you're about halfway. You now know that you've got 90 grams of protein to find throughout the rest of the day after you've eaten those meals, 65 grams of carbohydrate, and 40 grams of fat. So you've then now know you can have products within that one. So obviously, in terms of the carbohydrates, I would look to have that on those 65 carbohydrates after training, and then obviously the protein, I know I'm going to have those 3 meals, and like we discussed earlier in the video, I'm going to have to supplement from a protein shake to get those 90 grams, and then coming back to the fat, okay, I know I'm 40 grams short, okay, I can actually have, to a certain degree, something that's not very good for me, because, okay, I need to get the fats on board. So it's looking at that to work out how much you are deficient in the numbers, and there's a little bit of leeway. So if you fancy some chocolate and there's the numbers are there to have, you can have that, because it's filling in the numbers. Okay, it's not perfect, but it kind of gives you a little sense of how would I say it, not a guideline, but a guidance as to where you're at. So the take home from what I would say, the best tip for that would be, obviously, for watching this, would be to get the MyFitnessPal app and have a play around with it, and try, for the ones who actually track your macros already, have a look at and see where you're actually deficient. What say, for example, you are actually going above. Okay, what are you eating that are making you go above your numbers? And for the ones that don't currently track it and would like to know more about it, comment in the comments below and say, yes, I'd be interested to know more about it, and I could obviously set aside some bit of time and speak to you one-to-one on a consultation video. And if that's something you'd like to do and know more, kind of look at your nutrition more in depth, just write a message in the comments below, and I'll get in contact with you. So, like I said yesterday, do comment on below that you've liked the video, and do comment with any feedback, as I really appreciate it. And the last point I would say, if there's any videos that you'd like to cover in the future, just put those in the comments below as well. So until tomorrow for the final one of the week, I will see you then.